Welcome to another episode of Steps Podcast. This is episode 63, and I have a very special guest with me today. Her name is Carolina, and we're going to get started in just a couple of minutes, but I wanted to share, a little bit more insight as to what this episode is going to be about. Most of the time we're talking ADUs and we're talking different, investment strategies, whether it's for, cash flow or passive income or retirement or helping a family member. And I think today's topic is two of my favorite topics. We're going to talk about ADUs and we're going to talk about homeschooling, which is something that is new for me, right? The homeschooling journey with my son. Haven't shared a whole lot on here, but I was able to take that leap of faith thanks to a lot of the people in my network, but specifically thanks to Carolina. When making the move to Florida, reached out to her and she was somebody who really helped me open up my mindset to the possibility that I could do it and that it really wasn't overwhelming. So I really want to thank her for being here. I'm going to give you guys a quick introduction and tell you a little bit more about her, and then we're going to dive right into it and talk about the importance of ADUs, homeschooling, and how ADUs bring so much flexibility into the marketplace aside from, creating cash flow. So Carolina Perez had a 21-year career in public education as an aide, a teacher's aide, and administrator. As a first-generation American, she followed the traditional path of earning degrees and building a career. However, she and her husband also ventured into real estate investments while working full-time W-2 jobs. She and her husband have now retired from the field of education, and today they are self managed. They self manage their rentals, have built some ADUs, which I'm excited to talk about, have done some flips, and run a short term rental business. She also is the program director for Heather Blankenship's mastermind called the Society of Entrepreneurial Women, and she coaches members on creating a vision, goal setting, and mindset, all while homeschooling her two kids. Her journey from traditional career to a full-time real estate investor has been transformative, and she's excited to share her knowledge and experience to provide others with value. And I'm so super excited to hand it off to her so she can give us her version and tell us a little bit more about her.
Hi, yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here today. I love sharing my journey with others to give people hope that you don't always have to follow that traditional path. As you know about me, like I went to college. I got the credentials, got the degrees. I was in college forever, and I thought I was going to be a teacher for the rest of my life. And then I became an administrator, and I thought, okay, I'm going to really change programs and change the school system from the inside. But in doing that, I realized how much of that, my time and energy, it took away from my children, right? So I'm grateful to my past self for taking those risks and investing in real estate on the side while my husband and I were working our full-time W-2s, and allowed us then the freedom to make that transition from working a traditional W-2 job to then taking that leap of faith on us and becoming full-time real estate investors and retiring completely from the field. For me now, it's been 2 years, and my husband, it's been a year for him. He was a teacher also. So I'm excited to share that journey because I know that's really, for a lot of people, it's really hard to imagine. If you're in a full-time W-2 right now, you're kind of thinking like if you're feeling like you want to change your situation or want something different, you're envisioning a different future for yourself, it can feel like a really impossible task at the moment. But I love sharing my knowledge with that and my experience because it wasn't always easy, and it wasn't always like it was a lot of scary moments and a lot of tears and stretching and growing that I had to do in order to persevere. But my long-term goals always pulled me forward to you know keep pushing ahead so that we can have the life that we now get to live.
That's so awesome and so empowering, right, to hear that. And I think there's a very important piece to it is that your husband was also in the same field and was also willing to pivot and adapt to a whole new mindset that it was possible, right? Because I see a lot of couples where they're not supportive, or they don't have that support from their partner, or maybe sometimes it's scary, right? You have two people that are working a W-2 and it's like Do we really want to take this risk, right? But I think in taking that leap of faith and taking that risk, you really get to know yourself on a whole deeper level. It takes you on this personal journey and this personal growth path that you would have never probably unlocked, right? Had you never explored or taken that risk. I would say walk us through that mindset of you were teaching your kids. I know are a little bit older, right? They're older than my son. So you were teaching up until they were 2, 3 years ago, right? So at what point, what was like that pivotal point in your life that you're like, you know what, this just doesn't make sense and I actually want to venture off into possibly investing? Or did you have investments already? Like what did that transition look like?
Yeah, so I have to give a lot of credit to my husband. He had the vision. He's definitely the visionary in our business, and I am the integrator, right? So he had this vision, and I'll never forget. Way back when, he's like, "Yeah, we should own rentals and this and that," and I'm like, "What are you talking about? Why would we want to do that?" We have successful careers, and I was very happy at my job, but that's the thing. I really loved my job. I loved it, and it was so impactful what I was able to provide for families and be able to do, supporting teachers and all of that. But what really changed for me was when COVID happened. So we were in California at the time. We were living there, and we had a hard shutdown. 18 months, we were completely shut down. And so work was very stressful because we literally had to reinvent school overnight. And like, how do you teach? Because I specifically worked with students with IEPs. So how do you teach students who already, have difficulty with like attention span and all of those, different challenges? How do you then teach them on Zoom, and how do you even use Zoom, right? Like I had never even used Zoom before that. And here I was having to coach other teachers on how to do that. So we were all stumbling through it together. So work was really stressful, but it ended up being a really great blessing for our family because it allowed us to be home with our kids. And so we accidentally started homeschooling with them, right? Because the school shut down, and I was like, we are educators, like this is our realm. So I took that weekend and I put a bunch of curriculum together. I made their schedule, and I'm like, all right, starting Monday, everyone's on a schedule. This is what we're doing. And ended up being like the best 18 months for us because we grew so close as a family, and it was such a beautiful time, and I got to really like be with my children. I got to see them grow. I got to be there for all of the moments that I had previously like had been missing because I was always at work. And when I wasn't at work, I was thinking about work, right? Like all of my energy and time was for work. And so having those 18 months with my kids was such a beautiful time for our family. So when it was time for everybody to go back to in-person school and for us to go back to, everybody to go back in person, all of us had a really hard time adjusting to that. So that was really the catalyst for us that was like, okay, I want something different because I can see what is possible now. Like I can see what we can have, the life that we can have. And it didn't feel right to me personally to be like, hey, I'm away from my children for the majority of the day, and I only get to spend 2 hours a day with them. Like when they, bath time, and put them to bed. And during that time, it's like, yeah, homework, dinner, bath time, put them to bed. And I had to wait for the weekends to have experiences with them. And I was like, this isn't what I want. And my husband and I made that decision of like, okay. By that point, we had been making some investments. We had been doing some investments, and we had things already in the pipeline. And when I was doing that, at the time when I started doing real estate investing, I always thought, well, it's my safety net. So in case something happens, we can sell a house and like pay the medical bills or whatever that was, right? So that was more of a safety net for me. It was never intended to be like, I'm going to quit my W-2. But what it allowed me to do was then have the option to quit my W-2. So I'm grateful that my husband had the vision to do it, and I was able to execute in buying like some rentals. So that when that moment came, I was like, hey, this is the year we're going to take to really prepare ourselves financially, get everything in order so that we can go ahead and quit our job by next summer. So that was our big catalyst was COVID, and that was the big switch for us.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think it's so powerful going through, dark times like COVID, right? Which in your case, really like your guys' relationship as a family, as a unit flourished. And I completely can relate to that because moving from California, to Florida in just these last 8 months, we moved here in September. The relationship with my son and Claudia and all three of us is completely different, right, than what it would have been when we were out there. Even for Alex too. And I think when I moved here, I was like, okay, I need to reach out to somebody who kind of knows, like, what does that curriculum look like? What does the day to day look like when you're homeschooling? But for me, it was exactly that. I wrote it down actually in my journal like a year and a half ago, and one of the goals was I need to homeschool Alex. So I was already thinking about it. I mean, I think since Alex was like, since he started school, right? If I'm being quite honest, since he started school at 4 years old, I knew that that wasn't the life that I wanted to live. Like, I knew that at some point I wanted to be able to homeschool him and enjoy those years, and to each their own, right? Some mothers are okay with that, but for me, it didn't also sit well, knowing that there was other options. And I was already in real estate, right? So deep down, like, I knew that that just wasn't the vision for me long term.
Yeah.
So I wrote it down, and then fast forward to now, here we are. And that's been a whole other journey,
Yeah.
right? Because like
Yeah.
you're like, oh yeah, I'll homeschool him, we'll hang out at home. Then you realize like it's really being super resourceful, and thinking outside the box, because you are thinking outside the box already and putting them, through this
Yeah.
homeschooling journey. So you have to build your own community. You got to find people that are sort of on the same path that you can relate to, and that see that same vision. So it could be a lonely road. It's almost like being an entrepreneur, right? Now you got to find other entrepreneurship type of friends that will continue to grow with you and can like support you and motivate you. But overall, is it worth it? 1000%. I think everybody should homeschool their kids, right, at some point. But if for people, it's just so unattainable and then their current status, right, with the current mindset that they have. So I think walking people through your journey, right, as W2, both of you guys are on the same page. You start buying investments, then you start figuring out, oh my God, I can actually scale this. It's not just the safety net, right?
Yeah.
So at what point did the whole ADU concept come into play? Because I know you guys have done two now, or a
Yeah,
couple, right?
yeah, yeah. We have a couple now. So, and I want to touch on something you brought up. Like, you had a very strong why about
Hmm.
wanting to homeschool your son, and I think that's really important when people have these ambitious goals or big dreams. Is really narrowing in on their why. So I feel like when you have that really important why, like for me, it was the same thing. That making that leap of quitting my W-2 and doing full time real estate investing, the why was so important to me, and it was because of wanting the freedom over my time to spend with my children, right? And for you, it's the same, like being able to homeschool your son. So I think a lot of times when people get stuck in that fear and that analysis, like really focusing on like what is your why, like what is that bigger vision of why you want to do these things, right? Like because that why is going to push you through the fear. I've talked to people, they're like, how did you do it even though you were scared? I'm like, you just do it scared. Like there's
You
no
do everything. You do everything scared. I mean, I
yeah,
was even scared when I called you. I was like, will I get in trouble? Like, what does the process look like? Right? I was just fear based. But I think everything that you do, if you do it with fear, you'll eventually get past that. You kind of have to have fear, by the hand, and just bring him or her along
yeah,
the journey. Eventually, you're going to be able to you kind of diffuse it. You're able to quiet the noise, with when it comes to fear, because it is new to you, right? It's a whole new concept. But I will say that it is your why. You have to be super clear with your why, and then attaching like why is the why, right? Like, why do I want to homeschool him? It's not just to be at home and like being able to educate and feed into him what I want to feed into him, right? It's
yeah,
more about giving him those options that, of abundance, and these different perspectives and different opportunities and different experiences. So having the flexibility of time, even on how we spend time together, right? Like, now I've been able to set my schedule to where I don't have any calls or podcasts or phone calls until 12. Nothing happens between 8 and 12. That's my time with him, right? And I'm able to do these things, and then I can pick up again later in the evening. But it's so nice to be able to, like, go to the other room and check up on him in between calls. It's like those little moments of experiences that I really am super grateful for, that
Yep.
I know aren't going to be here forever, right? As mothers, we understand that at some point these kids are going to grow up and they're going to venture off, hopefully to do well in their own journey. So in the meantime, it's like, how can we cultivate some strong bonds and relationships and co-create and live life together? But a lot of people are so stuck day to day, they're on survival mode.
Yep.
They don't even have the time to stop and think like, yeah, you're right. Like, at what point, am I going to take a step back and not feel guilty about it, and understand that there's ways where you can invest, and that those investments will pay you for your time that you can now, spend with your kids. So I think maybe sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's guilt too, because you
Yeah.
were saying earlier, like, if you weren't working, you'd be thinking about the kids, and then if you're with the kids, you're thinking about work, right? So it's
Yeah.
this constant fear of losing something, and like being attached to things.
Yeah,
So
yeah, definitely, definitely, and and then the great thing is that your kids, as you said, like your kids in the room. My daughter's literally sitting next, like she's over there, she's doing her work on her computer right now, as I'm doing these, and so she hears me doing podcasts or doing my coaching calls, or like
right,
right before this, I was running the coaches meeting for the coaches that coach for our mastermind. And so they're absorbing all of that information, by being in the room with me. And you're right, you're having that flexibility of your schedule. So I block everything for like Tuesdays and Thursdays is when I do work on my business and work on the mastermind. And then the other days are for homeschooling my kids. And of course, things come up, like I work on things in the evening, but those days are precious. And so those are the times where I'm teaching the kids, or we're going out, or we're joining a homeschool event, or doing things like that. So it's having and being able to be fully present in those moments of like, I am fully here. But they also understand, sometimes mommy needs to answer a text, like when we're flipping a house or something and there's a water leak. We
right,
have the plumber out there. So like there's certain things that happen, but they're right there with me, like learning alongside me about like, how do we flip this house, or how are we screening this tenant? And so I definitely incorporate our business into our homeschooling, and I put the two together. So my kids are now 8 and 12. I mean, I'm sorry, 9 and 12. She just turned 9. But we started like 2 years ago, fully homeschooling them. And like I said, we did it kind of during COVID, and then we took that year to make that transition here to Florida, and then we've been doing it now for 2 years. So even when they were little, like people have younger kids, and you're thinking, oh, they're not going to be able to sit for that long. It's really training that skill up, just like any other skill. And so I use things like visual schedules to kind of keep them on track. So they have a schedule while mommy has a schedule, right? And so I have things like, I brought this real quick. So like they'll have an independent learning schedule, and this is what they're working on, and they check things off during the day. And then I even have one that's like a summer schedule right now, which is a little more easier stuff, since they're like, it's summer, mom. But having like systems like that in place allows you to balance like homeschooling your kid while you're running a business. So it is definitely possible. And then, like I said, integrating a lot of those two things together. But I want to circle back because you asked me about the ADUs.
yes,
So for us, all our long-term rentals are in Southern California, right? Which everybody can talk really bad about that market, and like how it's not. They tell you don't invest in California. All the gurus tell you, right? But we were born and raised in California, so we didn't know any better. So we just
right,
invested in our backyard. It was at a time where I literally was just trying to figure it out on my own. I didn't, between like Bigger Pockets, podcasts, and then books, I didn't understand at that time the value of being part of like a mastermind or community, which I wish if I could go back, I could tell myself, because I think it definitely would have escalated our process. But at the time, I didn't know. And so I was just trying to figure it out. And so we had bought a couple rentals, and then I was trying to figure out like, well, how do I maximize rent? And then I was just researching, and I came across like, oh, you can build an ADU. And then that led me down a whole rabbit hole. Like, what's an ADU? How do you do that? Oh, you got to talk to the county. So I went to the county. And so a lot of it was just trying to like figure it out on my own. Like, what's the next step? What's the next step? And so I think when people get stuck, they're trying to look at the whole mountain and like, well, how do I build all of these things? Especially when
right,
you follow people on social media and they're like, I have 100 rentals, or like, I have all these assistants and employees. And like, you look at that mountain and you're like, that is super intimidating. But it's really just focusing on like, what's that next, investment for you, or what's that first investment for you? And for us, that first ADU we built, it was also looking at like what resources that I have around me, right? So as I was like trying to figure out like, do we do a short-term rental? Do we do this? And I was trying to figure out all these different paths. Um, I came across the ADU strategy and I was like, dude, this totally makes sense. Like, if we build that house in this giant backyard, there was a house already there. There's this giant land. I was like, if we just build a house, the amount of cash flow we can get from it is insane. And then we do a cash out refi on the whole property. And at that time, the interest rates were lower, but you could still definitely do it now. So we were able to do the cash out refi to get our money back from building that ADU, right? So the math, like everything made sense on paper. But even then, it was still terrifying to do it because I'm like, okay, everything, I think I'm doing this right. I think everything makes sense, but everything from even like finding the architect, working with the county, inspections, like building it, it was.
I think you were even reaching out to me at that time. I don't know if it was during that one or the second one, but I remember you were looking into financing and I was like, yeah, reach out to this person. So you were really doing the research more than most people. I think most people just allow themselves to be led by what other people are saying rather than doing the research. So like going to the county, and I always tell people like look up the HCD handbook, like read it yourself, get familiar with the terminology, just start there, and that's going to build confidence, and not feel so overwhelmed, because you're right, it could seem like with social media, like there's no way that you can scale that fast, and of course you can't scale that fast, but you have to do it baby steps, one step at a time. So the way you were doing it, and it seems like because you are the integrator, you were doing that, and then I'm assuming you brought that up to your husband's attention and you're like, hey, we got to do this.
So he was definitely like, he was my squeaky wheel. So I would be like, because it was hard, like the county, like they'd be like, oh, 12 days. I mean, the permitting process, like there was a lot of just obstacles that we had to face along the way, especially too because it was a county that it was like an unincorporated county of LA County. So there was a lot of just like red tape and things that would get stuck, and then they weren't sure like the electrical or the like all of the intricacies of it, and so they didn't really even know what they were doing. And so then it was hard. So then we were like trying to figure out, they would tell us one thing and then tell us another, and then this guy would say that and that guy would say that. So it was a lot of, he was my, like I was kind of the, like I said, I would come up with the game plan, and then my husband, it was definitely a team effort. And that in itself is like being able to work with your partner, right? And so what worked really well for us is we had a running Google Doc, and we had all of the tasks. Like I would come up with like our action steps, like here are the action steps we need to do. And then each of us, and we still do this to this day, we've been doing this now for I don't know how many years, and it works really, really well for us because I'm not having to nag him or remind him, or he's like, oh, God was on me about this. Like it's all in the Google Doc. I pick 3 tasks to focus on for the week, and he picks 3 tasks to focus on for the week. And then we would schedule a weekly business meeting. So when we were both working full-time W-2s, it was a little bit harder to do that, but we have the power of Zoom. So him and I would schedule, especially during this process of trying to build ADUs and all that, we would schedule a weekly Zoom meeting. So it was typically during his lunchtime, and it'd be like on a Tuesday at 12 o'clock or whatever. And we would meet on Zoom from wherever we were at, and we would have our business meeting and go over our Google Docs. Because what happens is when you're at home, you're busy with the kids and all of the, like taking care of the house, the laundry, cooking, all those stuff. You don't really get a chance to sit down and have a meeting. So we made it a point to be very intentional with our action steps. And so we would have weekly business meetings, and then we had action steps that each of us were focused on. And that's how we were able to execute like buying rentals and building ADUs while we were working the full-time W-2s. So that was like a really great, and we still do that now, but now we do it on Sundays because we have, both of us have more flexibility with our time. So we still have our weekly business meetings on Sundays now.
So you have to still treat it like a business, and that's super important. I mean, I do the same Sundays, but we were doing it weekly, and then I was like, this is too much. So we now do it, I think it's once a month, every last week of the month, last Sunday. We just kind of touch base on where we're at, right, when regards to health, relationships, finance, and spirituality. Like those are the 4 that we tap into. But yeah, I mean, you definitely have to educate yourself before you start the process. Now take us to where you're at now, right? Now you built them throughout that, all that chaos. And I know you had to go through a lot because the cities at that time were still trying to figure it out. Shoot, a lot of them are still trying to figure it out. And as I was talking about this yesterday, as new legislation keeps updating, like you're not even giving the cities a break. Like they're learning stuff and then you're hitting them with, here's a whole other new set of legislation that just passed. So it's like having that, that awareness then allows you to just have some empathy and come from a place of understanding. But it is scary and it is a process, and I think a lot of people aren't willing to wait that amount of time either, right? Because like, what was the time frame for these ADUs?
Yeah, so that first one took probably a year and a half from start to finish. And again, the actual construction part was the fastest part. It was everything before
Everything else.
everything the inspection. And then the second one took about a year, right? And that can sound scary to people,
Right.
oh my gosh, but I always say like time is gonna pass regardless, right? Like where were you a year ago and now here you are and you're like, oh my gosh, it's been a year. Like we're all so surprised about how fast time goes, but like it happens every year, right? Like time goes by really, really fast. So for me, like the ADU play is so great because of the cash flow it brings you and the appreciation it brings to that property. But it is definitely a longer term, a
A
long,
long play.
yeah. So you're not going to build an ADU tomorrow, be like, hey, I'm going to build it in 3 months. I mean, that like, again, I don't know personally people doing that because the way the cash
No,
work.
no, yeah.
So it's definitely like long play, but once it does, oh my gosh, it like brings a ridiculous amount of appreciation to the property. Like that first one that we did, we had that property appraised before we built because we took some of the equity out of the house to help build the ADU. And when it appraised, it was about around 400,000. And then after we built it and everything was said and done, it was over 700,000 with the ADU. So it like almost doubled.
Almost
And this was
double.
a couple years ago, right? So think about what it's worth now, right? Knowing how houses appreciate in California. So even just built like how much value it brings to the property, and like just so it definitely like, was it worth all the headaches for that year and a half? More like 100%. Like I would do it all over again, right? So that definitely is a great strategy of leveraging property that you already have and doing an ADU. So either extending the house, converting a garage, or however you want to do it, build something in the back. Definitely a great play, but it's a long-term play for sure.
Definitely a long-term play. And I think one of the things we were talking about offline is that what I love about ADUs is that it gives so much flexibility, right? So maybe you're somebody who is okay with your W-2 right now, everything's fine. You have a property and you have some equity and you have the option to build an ADU. And at some point, maybe you're considering also homeschooling your kids, right? If you had the opportunity, or you're in a position where you're not really relying on the cash flow, but you're banking on the forced appreciation, you could actually homeschool your kids in the ADU space, right? I've seen a couple of homeschool slash office workspaces slash yoga studios slash wellness centers, right? Because that's like the hype right now, the wellness industry. A lot of ADUs in the luxury space are building ADUs for that, recreational purposes. Homeschooling is one of them. Pickleball, believe it or not, indoor pickleball. So there's like a whole different different like ideas around it, and the multiple uses for it. And maybe that's one topic that I wanted to bring up to the table too, is like, just as an idea, you could actually build an ADU, use it as a office space. If you're working from home and you're considering homeschooling, it can be a multi purpose type of room. And then at some point, once the kids grow up, like, you can now rent it out, and in that time you've probably like had so much in enforced appreciation, and now you can also bank on the cash flow at that point. Or maybe you have them live in the ADU until they're 18 and rent free, like at that point you paid it off too.
Yeah, like I have a friend, she ended up building an ADU in her parents' backyard because her parents needed, care. And so she's able to
Mhm.
keep an eye on her parents and then have her own space. And then the idea, and then a crazy amount of appreciation, again, because it's in California. So again, once that property, either they end up renting both units when everybody moves out, or they can sell it for a tremendous amount of more money. So that is also another use if like you have parents that are older and maybe they need care.
Yeah, I mean, assisted living. I know I had a friend who did something similar, and she was like, yeah, I can't pay 8,000 a month for assisted living for my mom. Like that makes no sense. It makes more sense for me to use the equity that we have on my parents' house and then build, an ADU with that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Same thing with my father-in-law. He built a, so this is before like the whole ADU play came. Like, he built that guest house in the back. Uh,
yeah.
and it was for his mom, like to move in there.
Mm,
And then now, since she now lives in Florida, but now he just uses that as his office space, right? But again, it a crazy amount of appreciation on the house, and then they have that option if they ever needed to, they can rent it out easily, right, and have some additional income.
right. And what are your guys' goals like moving forward? What is it? What's something that you guys are? What's the next, 5-year game plan look like for you guys?
Yeah.
What
So
are the investments and the school journey, homeschool journey?
yeah, so my kids are like, so they're 9 and 12 right now. So I feel like the majority of my time is really focused on the kids, and then building up their skills, and not just obviously reading, writing, math, that kind of stuff. But my kids are actually part of a mastermind themselves called Teen Tycoon, with Bill Allen, and so they're learning about business and entrepreneurship. And so my goal, my husband and I, our next goal is to really focus on building a scalable business. So we really want to get into, like, we've done the ADUs, and we have our long-term rentals, and we're in a really good spot right now when it comes to our like passive income. But now we're thinking, like, what's that next phase of our life? Like, how do we really like truly build a business that's going to be scalable, where we start bringing in employees, having a pool of investors, and really like hone down on a market where we have a strategy that we're just going to rinse and repeat. And so as the kids can grow into that business as well, right? So that's kind of what we're looking at, is like, how do we focus on setting a really strong foundation for that, rather than just thinking about like, well, because up until now it's been kind of like we just wanted to get the next investment, we wanted to get the next investment, and so it was just one at a time, just trying to figure out how to grow a portfolio. But now I'm thinking even bigger of like, how do we grow a business around this and like really scale it up, so that once the kids are older, which is not that far away, we
Right.
already have like some solid systems, a solid market, and we just it's just like that rinse and repeat.
And
um,
when you say build a business, are you talking like the management side of the portfolio, scaling that business, or what sort of business? Is it more like a coaching business that you're trying to scale?
So more of like, so like I said, so right now it's always been kind of like getting that next deal, but I want to think beyond the next deal. I want to think like, I want to create a system where we are buying plots of land and we're building houses with ADUs, right? And it's like,
Mm,
we have a market picked out, we already have our pool of investors, we have our attorney, we have our bookkeeper, like we have it, like the whole system is just down, and it's just becoming like that rinse and repeat. Like, we already know what our returns are going to be, and like how to pay out the
right.
investors, and really focusing more on scale versus just like the next one, right? Because like I said, that's been kind of our mindset up until now. It's like that
That's
next
a
one.
really good strategy right now because, especially in this type of market, right? You've got a lot of people in the multifamily space, for example, who are in a position where they're hurting if they didn't make the right choices a few years ago.
Yeah,
They're in a position where you can actually, acquire some of that multifamily. I'm kind of on the same boat as far as like creating partnerships, right? I
yeah,
don't know that I want to get into the syndication space yet, but I'm very open to the idea because I think that's one way to scale a business, right? It's like, let's all bring our money together. Let's acquire land or multifamily, convert a lot of the existing space, force appreciate that value, and then pay out the investors and, rinse and repeat the process, refi, pay them out, keep it, or 1031 exchange it to something else bigger and better. But I think that's really cool that you're not just looking at how do I buy the next SFR and add an ADU. Now you're thinking like, how do we buy acres, or land, and then build multiple ones. And now you're really talking, scaling a portfolio in a very short amount of time, because it takes the same amount of effort, right, to buy one than to buy 100 units or buy 40 acres of land. So I think I definitely see you and your husband doing that and getting that together.
yeah. I know. I'm
Right.
excited for that. I'm thinking about, again, like, I'm like, we got to think bigger. Like, how are we setting ourselves up for that next phase? Because right now a lot of my time is for my kids, and really setting them up and focusing on them. But like I said, before I know it, it's a blink of an eye, they're going to be off. And like, they're so independent already. I'm like so proud of them. It's been amazing watching their independence grow these last couple
Mhm.
years. Like they cook their own meals. Like they're so good. And but a lot of practice, a lot of opportunities, a lot of mistakes along the way where it's like, oh no, that's burning, you know. So, but at the end of the day, it's giving them the flexibility of like, okay, you learn to cook because you burnt a couple things, right? And it's having to be okay with that, like having to be okay with I don't have a magazine house, right? Like there's stuff everywhere, you know, to a point, like neat little clutters of things,
Yeah,
but
I mean, same here. I think my room is clean, but I don't know what his room looks like. And I help him every now and then, but I've created a checklist. And it's a checklist not just around like reading, writing, and, sharing like your gratitude list, but like chores. Like you cook your own food, you wash your own clothes,
yep,
like he has certain duties like taking out the trash, feeding sprinkles, like he has
yeah,
his responsibility. And I think that's super helpful for kids in building their self esteem, building their confidence, not problem solving, which was very hard for me because I think when I was working, I was so caught up in LA. I was just working all day. And when I would come home, I honestly wasn't even feeding him the right food, right? Like just, and I think a lot of moms get caught up in that. You're tired, you're busy, you've been working all day, you're mentally exhausted. So you give them the cheapest food, right, to eat. You don't really spend good quality time with them, maybe 20 minutes of your present time. You're not exploring like their thought process, their mindset, and like their different changes and their thoughts. And now, like, it's totally different. I mean, we cook our foods together. He understands the importance of eating healthy, working out, and like he sees me doing the podcast too. And now he has his own YouTube channel, so they're learning other skills that I think are so valuable. I mean, at my last event, he spoke in front of 50 people and he wasn't even shy. I was like, oh my God, I was so proud. Uh, these are the types of skills that if you're not afraid to speak in front of people, that these skill sets are going to take you far in life and you're going to be super confident to do whatever it is that you want to do and kind of, push them forward. But while we're doing that, I think it's also important as mothers to not let ourselves go. So it's
yeah,
dope that you have big goals for yourself and you're like, we'll bring the kids along and venture them into this vision of ours, but they are part of that vision and then they can go off and do whatever they want with their vision. But you created something that will still continue to live and produce, and just it goes past like their wants and needs as well, and
yeah,
like giving yourself purpose too, because it's very easy to lose yourself within your kids too, and kind of just live for them. It's this weird balance for, I think most moms know what I'm talking about. It's like not
yeah.
feeling mom guilt, but also not letting yourself go.
Yeah,
uh,
definitely. And that's why like I love that I'm still I call it recycling my skills. So I had a very
yes.
fulfilling career before I decided to leave my W-2, and like I said, I loved my job. And so I when I left, there was a little bit of that identity crisis of like, well then if I'm not the autism program specialist, like what am I then? And so it was
Right.
really like digging deep into like what are my skill sets, and then being able to recycle that and still be able to provide impact and value to communities. And so to me, it was such a blessing being part of the, Heather's mastermind, and then growing within that mastermind to be able to now, support other women who are on their journey and their venture, and everybody kind of comes in a different part of their journey. So I feel so incredibly blessed to be able to continue coaching and providing value, and sharing experiences. So I feel still fully blessed when it comes to like my career in a sense, but I still then have the flexibility to balance out, my time and energy on focusing on my children, which is what I had been wanting for a really long time. So it's like being in a really good spot. And again, all of that came with having that clear vision, setting those clear goals, and then taking those actions every single week, every single day. It's like that compound effect. It's like the mountain may seem big, but if you're chipping away at it, like you're working on. I always tell ladies like pick your top three things you're gonna do tomorrow or like the next day. Like always have your top three and just chip away at things, and that will definitely
What,
move the
and this
needle.
may be something that we can like kind of close off with as we finish off the episode. What would those three actionable steps look like, right? Like, let's say you're a W-2, you don't have investments, you want to start investing in hopes that you do have that freedom at some point so that you can work from home or not work from home and maybe homeschool your kids and have some sort of flexibility, right? I think people sometimes don't even know where to get started. So are there like three main touch points that you hit on, like savings or finances, maybe taking a look at your finances and what does that look like? Like, what are three exercises that you would give people when they don't really even know where to get started?
Yeah. So the first one I want to say is community. So find a community of people
Mhm.
doing the thing that you want to do. So whether that's joining a mastermind, going to meetups, being on online forums. So just really surround yourself with people who are like doing the things that you want to aspire and do, because that is going to provide you so much value and knowledge while you're on this journey, right? So definitely the first part would be to seek community. The second one would be definitely looking at your finances and having some clear targets of what do those numbers look like for you, because you have kind of like what is that monthly target. People come in, they're like, I want to make $80,000 in passive income monthly. You're like, that's an awesome goal, but do you have to hit 80,000 to be able to quit your W-2, right? So looking at like what I had to take a hard look at like what is like the minimum that we are okay living off of, so that I could take that leap, because then now I have so much more time to focus on the real estate, which is going to make it a lot faster to build to that 80,000 or whatever that number is.
Right.
So having some clear targets and clear goals of like, what is it that you want to accomplish with real estate investing, or with building ADUs and all of that. And then the third thing would be to like figure out like your investment strategy. So what resources do you have? Are you looking at maybe you already own a house, like you're in your primary home? Can you build an ADU in your current property? Like look at what's like some resources that you already have access to, or that low hanging fruit, I like to call it, to just
Hmm.
get you started on that first one. So if you're just kind of like trying to get that first one, like just focus on that one, and what is the next steps for that. So definitely like community, figuring out your finances, what money you also have, if you can pull out equity from your home, or what loan you could get. If you're like, as like if you're living in the home, you can get a construction loan or things like that if you're living there. And then like I said, the third one is figuring out your strategy, like what's your investment strategy moving forward.
Yeah, those are all awesome tips, I think, for any beginner, right, in their W 2. And maybe you have a W 2 and you also have a small portfolio or mid sized portfolio and you want to grow it or you want to do a 1031. Maybe you want to invest, right? And at that point, you could reach out to Carolina or myself and we can connect and figure out how do we scale together at some point, right? Because I think there's also a lot of fear around, that whole concept of being able to invest together as a community and buy more and build more, when with a lot more intention rather than just buying one door at a time, right? But I think with that comes a whole other episode which we can talk about, which would be building relationships, building a sense of community. But yeah, 100%. No, step number one would be join a community, and if that happens to be like tapping into the ADU space, we both have pretty good communities. I know that, Carolina. I don't know if you want to share also the community with Heather and kind of tell people a little bit about that. If anybody's interested in becoming a member or wants to join, feel free to give them more insight on that as well.
Yeah, so it's called the Society of Entrepreneurial Women, and so it's specifically for women who want to invest in real estate, are in real estate, and also for business owners and entrepreneurs. And so there's women in the community that have all kinds of experience. Some people are just getting started and they want to figure out how to get that first investment. We have other ladies who own like tons of RV parks or apartment buildings, and they have a very large real estate portfolio, or they own multiple businesses, very successful, and then everything in between. So really it's about a community of women, supporting women, uplifting women, sharing our resources, our experience, our knowledge. And then we have weekly live calls with guest speakers, and also just different topics. Like we're learning about how to underwrite a business, how to run short-term rentals, how to have different checklists and systems for when you're doing your bookkeeping, your accounting, all that kind of stuff. So we cover a wide range of subjects, and to help ladies be wealthy in all areas. So it's not just business and real estate, but we also look at like how do we support women when it comes to their fitness, when it comes to their family. Like a lot of the ladies, we talk about homeschooling and then the kids and all that kind of stuff. We also have like a book club, and so it's that personal development and growth. So we offer a lot of different things within the mastermind. We have different courses from like raising private money, how to buy an RV course. We're about to launch our course on how to buy your first investment in 90 days. So we're really excited to be getting that out pretty soon. I think we launched it on Monday. So that's going to be exciting. But definitely, if you want to learn more, Heather Blankenship is the founder of the community, and she has, you can find her on Instagram, Heather Blankenship time X3. It's like times 3.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can definitely follow me at I am Carolina. And I have a link on my profile as well. But yeah, and then we have some in-person events too. So we have one coming up in November in Orlando. So if you're just kind of someone's curious about what is the community about and how are the ladies in the community, definitely can come out and check out our event in November and get to know the community a little bit more.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that sounds like a great community. I know I didn't get a chance to go to the one in Fort, but maybe the one in Orlando, although I'll be there in October. But yeah, I'm a big believer of huge communities like that bring so much value. I don't think people understand, they underestimate the impact of hearing other people's stories, right? Like I'm sure your mindset opened up from owning a couple doors to scaling to possibly having apartments, or multiple ADUs if it wasn't for sharing conversations with women in the space that have, that amount of portfolios. Like I think for me, it's been the same thing, even through some of these episodes, right? I see people's knowledge, and I've had all kinds of people on this episode. One of my mentors, I mean, he's building 300 ADUs on a 700 unit building. And it's like, wait, what? Like,
Yeah.
I'm over here, like, working with clients who were thinking of building two maybe in their backyard.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of blew my mind. And it makes you think, it forces you to think bigger, and you can't unthink that anymore.
Yeah.
Like it really expands your mind, but that's priceless. That's something that nobody's going to share for any amount of money. It's like you have to be in the right room at the right time with right people. And so I think people underestimate the sense of community and how you can learn from other people. So
yeah, definitely. And like I was in a mastermind before that, and there tends to be, I don't know if this is your experience too, but there tends to be a lot of just guys in the room, right? Like it's hard to find other women.
Well, that's why I started the ADU Women's Mastermind, and
Yeah.
we legit have like 30 women every month. I'm like, okay, we need to start putting these in the school community. But that started from two women who hit me up on Instagram who were like lacking confidence. And I'm like, okay, the confidence is because we don't see enough women in the space, right? Because everywhere you go, it's mainly male dominated
Or when
panels.
you go places,
People.
like you go places, they want to like, oh, is your husband here? Or let me talk to your husband.
Yeah, yes,
I'm
yes.
my husband for this. I can make this decision. Yeah.
Right, right.
Like that. So yeah, no, it's definitely, so it's just different, like getting to talk to other women who are, again, moms, sisters, and wives, and like
It
talking
feels
about,
empowering to know, like, okay, that she's also homeschooling and she's investing and she knows what she's doing when it comes to business. It really shatters all the limited beliefs that you have about yourself.
or
Thinking,
sometimes just figure out we all don't know what we're doing together.
yeah, exactly. But that's why we're here, right? To figure it out together.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you see
100%.
people's lives and you're like, oh, they have it so together. And then you get to know them. They're like, oh my gosh, my kid was driving me crazy right now and I wanted to kill him. And you're like, oh, wow, they're like,
Yeah, me
person,
too.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's having this sense of community where it's like, we're going to get through this together.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
we're all struggling. And that is the honest truth, right? We're all in different levels. And although you've been very successful in where you're at and what you and your husband have accomplished so far, but I bet you that you said earlier, we are our biggest self-critics. I'm sure that you're not in your ideal, goals where you'd like to be. And in our eyes, we're like, well, you guys are so successful. And in your mind, you're like, well, I've already hit that goal. Like I'm on to the next, right? And it's always this constant growth battle, right? And being comfortable with change and growing, but not beating yourself up over it. So yeah, this was such a dope episode. I really want to thank you. And then also like just publicly thank you for building my confidence, right? When I had to go through my own homeschooling journey, which I'm still going through. But I think having a sense of community has helped, right? You're right. I have joined a couple homeschooling groups. Seeing like your stories also helps. Like I see little tips here and there, and it's super helpful. So I just want to thank you for your time. And I definitely am excited to hopefully have her on our school community. So if you guys want to join the ADU Play community, feel free to join, and we will most likely have her as a guest speaker. So if you guys have any questions around homeschooling or ADUs or investments, then you guys will have the opportunity to talk to her then.
Awesome. Thank you. So great being on. It was so great talking to
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys. Bye bye.